And let's see if we can't finish Bird Rock from the Golden Harp, from the Grey King. Will and Bran and Cathal are in the rock, and they have been challenged to a riddle contest by the three cloaked figures. If they pass, they receive the harp. If they fail, they are trapped in Bird Rock forever, and the harp is forever lost to the light. So let us begin. We shall answer, Will said. You, boy, the first. The blue mist swirled again. A bony finger was thrust, pointing at Bran, and the shadowed hood turned. Will turned too, anxiously. He had half expected this. Bran gasped. Me? But I... Will reached out and touched his arm. He said gently, Try. Only try. We are here only to try. If the answer is asleep in you, it will wake. If it is not, no matter, but try. Bran stared at him, unsmiling, and Will saw his throat move as he swallowed. Then the white head turned back again. All right. The soft, sibilant voice said, Who are the three elders of the world? Will felt Bran's mind reel in panic as he tried to find meaning in the words. There was no way to offer help. In this place, the law of the high magic prevented an old one from putting the smallest thought or image into another mind. Will was permitted only to overhear. So tense, he stood, overhearing the turmoil of his friends' thoughts as they tossed about desperately seeking order. Bran struggled. The three elders of the world. Somewhere he knew. It was strange and yet familiar, as if somewhere he had seen or read the three oldest creatures, the three oldest things. He had read it at school, and he had read it in Welsh, the oldest things. He took his glasses from his shirt pocket as if fiddling with them could clear his mind. He saw, staring up out of them, the reflection of his own eyes. Strange eyes, creepy eyes, they called them at school. At school. Strange, round, tawny eyes, like the eyes of an owl. He put the glasses slowly back in his pocket, his mind groping in an echo. At his side, Cathal shifted very slightly, his head moving so that it touched Bran's hand. The fur brushed his fingers, lightly, very lightly, like the flick of feathers. Feathers. He had it. Will at his side felt in his own mind the echoing flood of relief and struggled to contain his delight. Bran stood up straight and cleared his throat. The three elders of the world, he said, are the owl of Quimqualand, the eagle of Gornby, and the blackbird of Selly Garden. Will said softly, Oh, well done. That is right, said the thin voice above them unemotionally. Like an early morning sky, the light blue robe swirled before them, and the figure sank back into its throne. From the central throne rose the Lord in the sea-blue robe. Stepping forward, he looked down at Will. Behind its gray beard, his face seemed oddly young, though its skin was brown and weathered like the skin of a sailor long at sea. Will Stanton, he said, who were the three generous men of the Isle of Britain? Will stared at him. The riddle was not impossible. He knew that the answer lay somewhere in his memory, stored from the book of Gramarye, treasure book of the enchantment of the light that had been destroyed as soon as he, the last of the old ones, had been shown what it held. Will set his mind to work, searching. But at the same time, a deeper riddle worried at him. Who was the lord in the sea-blue robe, with his close interest in Bran? He knew about Cathal. Clearly he was a lord of the high magic. And yet there was a look about him. A look of... Will pushed the wondering aside. The answer to the riddle had surfaced in his memory. He said clearly, the three generous men of the island of Britain, Nud the generous, son of Senelit, Mordath the generous, son of Serwan, Redrich the generous, son of Twadwal, Tuglud, and Arthur himself was more generous than the three. Deliberately, on the last line, his voice rang, echoing through the hall like a bell. That is right, said the bearded lord. He looked thoughtfully at Will, and seemed about to say more, but instead he only nodded slowly. Then sweeping his robe about him in a sea-blue wave, he stepped back to his throne. The hall seemed darker, filled with dancing shadows from the flickering light of the fire. A sudden flash and crackle came behind the boys, as a log fell and flames leapt up. Instinctively Will glanced back. When he turned forward again, the third figure, who had not spoken or moved until now, was standing tall and silent before his throne. His robe was a deep, deep blue, darkest of the three, and his hood was pulled so far forward that there was no hint of a face visible, but only shadow. His voice was deep and resonant, like the voice of a cello. It brought music into the hall. "Will Stanton," he said, "what is the shore that fears the sea?" Will started impulsively forward, his hands clenching into fists, for this voice caught into the deeper part of him. Surely, surely, but the face in the hood was hidden, and he was denied all ways of recognition. Any part of his senses that tried to reach out to the great thrones met a black wall of refusal from the high magic. Once more Will gave up, and put his mind to the last riddle. He said slowly, "The shore that fears the sea." Images wavered in and out of his mind, great crashing waves against a rocky coast, the light green in the ocean, the realm of Tethys, where strange creatures may live, a gentler sea then, washing in long slow waves, an endless golden beach, the shore, the beach, the beach. The image wavered and changed. It dissolved into a green-dappled forest of gnarled ancient trees, their broad trunks smooth with a curious light grey bark. Their leaves danced above, new, soft, bright, with a delicate green that had in it all of springtime. The beginnings of triumph whispered in Will's mind. "The shore," he said, "the beach where the sea washes. But also it is a wood of lovely fine grain that is in the handle of a chisel and the legs of a chair, the head of a broom and the pad of a workhorse saddle. And I dare swear, too, that those two chests between your thrones are carved of it. The only places where it may not be used are beneath the open sky and upon the open sea, for this wood loses its virtue if soaked by water. The answer to your riddle, my lord, is the wood of the beech tree." The flames leaped up in the fire behind them, and suddenly the hall was brilliant. Joy and relief seemed to surge through the air. The first two blue-robed lords rose from their thrones to stand beside the third, like three towers. They loomed, hooded over the boys. Then the third lord flung back his hood of deep blue robe to reveal a fierce hawk-nosed head with deep-set eyes and a shock of wild white hair, and the high magic barrier against recognition fell away. Will cried joyously, "Merriman!" He leapt forward to the tall figure as a small child leaps to its father and clasped his outstretched hands. Merriman smiled down at him. Will laughed aloud in delight. "I knew," he said, "I knew, and yet—" "Greetings, old one," Merriman said. "Now you are grown fully into the circle. By this, had you failed in this part of the quest, all else would have been lost." The bleak, hard lines of his face were softened by affection. His dark eyes blazed like black torches. Then he turned to Bran. Taking him by the shoulders, Bran looked up at him, pale and expressionless. "And the Raven boy," the deep voice said gently. "We meet again. You have played your part well. It was known you would. Hold your head in pride, Bran Davies. You carry a great heritage within you. Much has been asked of you, and more will be asked, much more." Bran looked at Merriman with his cat-like eyes unblinking and said nothing. Listening to the Welsh boy's mood, Will sensed an uneasy but baffled pleasure. Merriman stepped back. He said, "3 lords of the high magic have for many centuries had guardianship of the Golden Harp. There are no names here in this place, nor allegiances in that task. Here, as in other places that you do not know yet, all is subject to the law, the high law. It is of no consequence that I am a lord of the light, or that my colleague there is a lord of the dark." He made a slight, ironic bow to the tall figure who wore the robe of lightest blue. Will caught his breath in sudden comprehension, and looked for the thin face hidden in the hood, but it was turned away from him, staring out into the shadows of the hall. The central figure, in the sea blue robe, stepped forward a pace. There was a great, quiet authority about him, as if he were confident without pomp in knowing himself the master in that hall. He put back his hood, and they saw the full strength and gentleness of the close-bearded face. Though his beard was gray, his hair was brown, only lightly gray-streaked. He seemed a man in the middle of his years, with all power undiminished, yet wisdom already gained. But, Will thought, he is not a man at all. Merriman inclined his head respectfully, stepping aside. "Sire," he said. Will stared, at last beginning to understand. At Bran's side the dog Caffel made the same small sound of devotion that he had before. Clear blue eyes looked down at Bran, and the bearded lord said softly, "Fortune guard you in my land, my son." Then Bran looked at him perplexed. The lord drew himself up, and his voice rose. "Will Stanton," he said, "two chests stand between our thrones. You must open the chest at my right and take out what you find there. The other will remain sealed in case of need until another time that I hope may never come. Here now." He turned, pointing. Will went to the big carved chest, turned its ornate wrought iron clasp, and pushed at the top. It was so broad, and the carved slab of wood so heavy that he had to kneel and push upward with all the force of both arms. But he shook his head in warning refusal when Bran started forward to help. Slowly the huge lid rose and fell open, and for a moment there was a delicate sound like singing in the air. Then Will reached inside the chest, and when he straightened again, he was bearing in both arms a small, gleaming golden harp. The hint of music in the hall died into nothing, giving way to a low, growling rumble like distant thunder. Closer and louder it grew. The Lord in the lightest sky blue robe, his face still hooded and hidden, drew away from them. He seized his cloak and swung it round him with a sweep of the arm. The fire hissed and went out. Smoke filled the hall, dark and bitter. Thunder crashed and roared all around, and the Lord in the sky blue robe gave a great cry of rage and disappeared. And that is the end of Bird Rock.